Welcome to his whole house, a place for healing.
Hi, and thanks for joining us as we continue into our fall season of coming into alignment with the purposes of God. I'm Claudia Ornelas, the Creative Partnership Director here at His Whole House, and today our show is a conversation about how to lay a foundation of integrity and build success in business. In this next hour, we'll talk about creating a culture of honor and proven values, and building those pillars of leadership that will uphold you and your business during challenging times. In the latter part of the hour, we'll save some time for a Q&A in case you've got some questions of your own. We're incredibly grateful to welcome our speakers today. We have a special guest with us, transitional life coach and author of the international bestseller, The Family Letter, Miss Debi Ronca, and Molly McNamara, the founder and executive director of His Whole House. So how do we create a culture of honor and proven values in the marketplace? Well, today, I hope that Debi and Molly can give you some valuable insight.
And thank you so much, Claudia, for that wonderful introduction. And welcome, Debi Ronca. So glad to have you with us, Deb.
Oh, Molly, it's wonderful to be here. I'm just looking forward to our time together today.
Absolutely. And today we're really excited because we're talking to our business leaders, and we are both business leaders as well. And so we can share our perspective and encourage our leaders out there who are wondering about today's culture and whether the culture is going to be that which changes them. And, you know, no one wants to be a toxic leader. And we hear that a lot. Or are they going to be the kind of leader that's going to change the culture? And that is where we can really stake a claim and bring in the 4 pillars. So today we're going to talk about 4 pillars that Deb and I have agreed are critical for that business leader and being able to connect for yourselves and for your employees and staff, because it is a tough thing out there right now with so many limitations. How do we create that culture of honor and value? So we'll be looking at perspective. We'll look at trust, honor, and value. So Deb, let's just jump right in. We're talking today about perspective, and perspective is something that each and every leader grapples with every day. Can you share with us some of the tools that you have brought to bear as you work with those business leaders?
Thank you, Molly. Well, perspective is so much of how we look at life, and we each look at it in a different way. So I'm a visual learner, so I always love to use just the simple tool of the hand. And I know those of you that are on the webinar, and Molly yourself, you could see this part of my hand, and I see the back of my hand. I see something very blank and empty, and you see maybe the beauty of the rings. You see different marks on my hand that I may not see. I could spend all day telling you how simple and plain the back of my hand is, but you won't believe that because you can only see your perspective. And that's why I believe we need to take the time to see the other person's viewpoint and their perspective so we can gain greater understanding of each other.
Excellent perspective. That is right. And I can tell you that today we even have those that are seemingly more needy than ever. And in the work of His Whole House and the ministry that we do, we see folks that are feeling like they're not being asked to rise up to their potential. And we want to say to business leaders, including ourselves, watch how that we are forming our teams and how that we can call forth the treasure that is within each and every one of the staff members, because perhaps it's the role that doesn't fit their exquisite treasure that's within. And being able to see that person and what they bring actually will strengthen them. In fact, we've come to understand through science that it is actually limiting to the brain if the full potential of someone is not nurtured and recognized and drawn out. So it is critical just understanding how our limited belief systems of someone's role can also impact us. Can you tell us a little bit more about the generations? How we can work with those different generations?
Absolutely. Well, the millennial generation is the largest population right now out in the workforce. And of course, there's a lot of boomers, and we have the Generation Z coming behind, the millennials. But perspective again, Molly, would be how we communicate. So a millennial is just loves the messaging and the text messages, email type of communication, where the boomer is going to want to do anything that's efficient, but prefers maybe phone calls or face to face. And so gaining insight on how each generational employee operates is really important so they can understand one another. And, for the employer, for the boomer, one of the greatest things they could do for the boomer is put them in a mentoring role in the organization, because they have a lot of wisdom and experience, and they can actually be mentoring some of the younger employees in your organization. And with your millennial, for employers, they love feedback. They actually love instant feedback. They want to know, am I doing a great job? And they look to you to be flexible with their schedule too. So there's some tips for the employers as well.
I like that. I like that. From our perspective, we've seen that when the employer is understanding, it will actually reduce the fears of the person. And the fears could be based on some prior wounding, some areas that have yet to be healed. And knowing that you can tap into what Deb is saying in regard to giving that feedback and really hearing that different perspective is actually going to do some wonderful work within their own lives. And that reduction of fear will lead then to a more productive and more satisfying engagement with the company. That's been our perspective.
Absolutely.
You have a tool that you use and I believe you're a teacher of the DISC. Can you share a little bit about that? DISC, I think is what it's called.
Yes, I am a consultant for the John Maxwell DISC Profile Assessment. And this is a tool I highly recommend, Molly, for every employer to invest in and take the time to have all of their employees along with the leader to take this assessment. Because what will happen as an organization is you're going to gain greater clarity and a deeper understanding within your organization. And what this is also going to allow you to see that as people encounter one another, everybody is motivated differently. Everyone communicates differently, and everyone views tasks and people differently. And when you take this assessment, the value that you receive is that you begin to understand the other personalities, styles within your organization and how to work better together, which ultimately the benefit is your organization will be stronger, because now everyone is going to know how to communicate and actually appreciate and work better together. So I highly recommend that. I've done that in different ministries and organizations as well.
Yeah.
So if
And
anyone,
I've actually, I know Deb is someone that you can reach out to as a business leader. If you're looking for that, we'll put her contact information. She actually can help facilitate those assessments, and we're grateful for that. Also, I've taken that. And sometimes it's very striking for the person themselves to recognize, oh my, I have a little bit of work to do to understand some others. I think I'm a D, and so I get to know that I'm about 3% of the population. And just having that self-knowledge does help. It brings a value to where you can just step back and listen in a different way. And I really must say, that's been my experience. So Deb, thank you for sharing that. And talk
You're
about
welcome.
experience. Well, there's one other thing that we want to be cognitive of when we think about the perspective, and that is anywhere where there's been a history for that employer or employees where they've felt that there's some accusation. And the fact is that if you're not seeing your employee rise up in a particular area, check in with them, and you'll be able to know pretty quick what's going right, what's going wrong, what's missing, and what's confusing. And you can find out if there's been some kind of uh, area where the person doesn't feel that they can rise up because of some external force, like an accusation. And I know that there is times in business where that subtle, coffee pot conversation has really turned into something that has really caused the employee to all of a sudden become a little bit stagnant. So be aware of that. The experiences in the workplace are critical, and understanding your employees is critical. So let's move on to trust. Trust is a huge topic, and we could spend a couple of webinars on that. So we're going to just touch on a couple of things. And Deb, I know that you had a couple of areas that you wanted to share a little bit, and perhaps a story, I believe.
Well, trust is the most valuable asset that a leader can have because your leadership is actually built on trust. It's the foundation. So if the trust gets compromised, it's going to make it difficult for you to lead. So there's three qualities that I believe every leader needs to have. And the three would be competence, where your employees really want to know, are you competent in your leadership? Which lends to the encouragement for every leader should never stop growing. You should invest in yourself, your own personal growth, because as you grow, you're going to have that much more to impart to your employees. The next would be connection.
Yeah.
The work environment is a place of performance, but it should also be a place of connection. So as a leader, you should be determining and planning some off-site events. Take your team golfing, go for after hour, go for dinner, do something, because actually the environment will produce more relationship interaction and you can build and develop trust. And the third would be character. Without character, your trust can never be built. Nations fall because of lack of character. It's so critical. So every leader should ask themselves, do a personal evaluation. Can my character be trusted? Are you consistent? Can your employees depend on your character? So for instance, if you were to make a mistake, are you able to step into the arena and say, I missed it on that one. I made a mistake. I can tell you your employees will value you more and trust you more because you're honest. People will forgive the honest mistake, but they can tell if you're being truthful or not. So don't compromise the trust because you're going to have to spend time building that back.
That's very, very, so true, so true. And I'm going to compliment on the issue that you bring up, the character. Character is something that we each bring our person into the workplace, and whether it is a ministry or whether it is a marketplace industry, we bring who we are, and valuing the fact that God has meant for each of us to bring all of our resources to the table and to marry the sacred and the secular together in the fullness of our design. I believe that gaining trust also is something that I've seen in one of my professions was in healthcare, and I gained more trust and ability to connect by bonding together who I was, even and especially in my faith perspective, sharing with respect and honor. I just recently just had a mentoring conversation with a physician who's taken a new position down in the medical center, and I asked her, I said, would you like to pray about the items that we're talking about today? And she said, I've not ever thought of bringing in my faith into the workplace, and how important that building character be a part of our sharing, because we don't want to miss that opportunity. She did say yes. We did pray together, and she is about to embark on a position that is quite large. And so, what an honor! You don't want to miss by not bringing forward all that you are. I also would say that as each of us begins to understand and discover the design that God's made us through some of the tools that we're talking about here, but also through the resources that God has placed in our hands, each of us can come into a new understanding of how we can connect with others and the benefits, like bonding after hours that Deb is speaking to. Also, I did personal rounds. I did morning rounds every day. I still do morning rounds. My staff and I share and we pray together. And we start by praying and thanking God for what he's done. And when I was in healthcare, I made walking rounds, and you won't find out what's really happening on the front lines unless you're willing to be on that front lines with the folk. And so that also, as a leader, builds that trust and begins to request and ask how it's going, what's going on, how's your mom at home. Those kind of things are critical. So let's segue, if we can, into our third pillar. Our third pillar is around honor. And Deb, what have you got for us in that particular venue?
Honor is another critical component of a healthy organization. I was speaking the other day to a young millennial, and I happened to ask him, what is it that you experience in your organization where you feel honored? And I loved the response that I got. He said, we actually have something called town hall. And on a monthly basis, they gather everyone that's in that particular office, and every individual and team accomplishment is recognized and celebrated. And I thought, wow, he feels valued and honored for the work that he's doing. And then they do it corporately on a yearly event. So I thought that was fresh and new. I loved that idea. And I think what is critical for every organization to have their own cultural mission statement. Culture is critical. You can sense a culture of an organization when you walk into their office, whether they're open, friendly, closed. You as the leader determine what that culture would be. What is your top priority for the values, the respect, and the honor in the way that your employees are going to interact with one another? Do you have a way that you're going to solve conflict? That should be a part of your cultural mission statement. I would also encourage you, if you don't have one, you could gather your employees and ask them how they feel the culture should be, because that's giving them voice and that gives them value by listening to their thoughts and ideas. Because if we don't listen, then we're saying, oh, we don't value, or honor what it is that you're saying. So I would get input, and maybe you do have a mission statement. It might be time to tweak it a little. So look at it, see, does it still serve your organization? And then I recommend that you get it framed, put it somewhere on a wall that everyone could see it every day and just be reminded of what the culture is.
Excellent point. And I think what I also have heard and experienced in my teams has been to hit the project against the mission statement is we've actually backed away from the project and asked the question to the group. Well, let's think about how this answers the mission statement, because this is the investment that we're making. So if it's way off base, then we may want to rethink, if it has the needed value, because there's so many objectives and so many priorities right now that it is for us, we are finding a lot of need to back away and check in with each other and check in to see if it's in on point with where our mission is. And I want to share a story that I had happen with one of my employees when I was in healthcare, and I ran trauma centers in the downtown Houston for a number of years. And one of the ways in which that we served the population was to input and take in the customer or the patient that was coming. And I remember one morning where I was making rounds pretty early, because I'm an early bird and I would get there about 5 or 6 a.m. and watched one of my registrants checking in a patient, and what I would call a prickly pear, someone that had a very, very immediate, urgent need that needed to be addressed, and that there was lots of conversation about how distraught she was and how difficult it was and how the time was, it was just too long to wait. And this can be pretty normal in a hospital setting. You can imagine, Deb, is like everybody's going to hurry up and wait. And yes, everyone's issue and trauma is critical for being there, but there has to be a prioritization. And my staff took the time to really listen to that person and to really be able to embrace that prickly pear in such a beautiful, honoring way that it was a joy. It was a joy to watch. And so this was a seasoned person. And at the next staff meeting, I took time to stop and say, what a wonderful job, and really commend her for the excellent job that she did with that person, that patient that was like a prickly pear. And immediately, you can see her sitting up straighter, and you can see her just leaning in as she began to take that on. And at lunch hour after the meeting, she shared how that she had had other experiences with prickly pears and how she had worked with others. And then the whole staff started trying to compare some stories about the prickly pear patient that they had had. And it's to say that there is another way to bring very difficult situations forward and be able to celebrate them in ways that are honoring and not necessarily pitying that poor staff member that had to care for that needy person. However, begin to see it as a mark of excellence in staff and a place where people can be honored. And so I just wanted to share that story because it was such a delight to my staff.
Wonderful story.
I think we're going to go on to the last of the 4 pillars that we're looking at today. We're looking at value. So Deb, can you share with us your thoughts, especially in relation to this particular book, which we know is an international bestseller, and we're excited to be able to offer this at the end of our program. Can you share about value? Because you've really come to bear on that.
Well, Molly, I believe there's a longing within all of us to be known, loved, valued, and celebrated. I believe we all walk around with these questions in our heart. Am I valuable? Have I made a difference? What impact have I made? And the rest of us have the answers to the questions in that person's heart. And we have got to learn to use the power of our words to speak forth the value that we see in the person that's in front of us. My book is about the family. but also you take that into every relationship that you have in life. Everyone longs to know their value and worth. And that's one area that we seem to struggle with a lot. That's a lot where the limiting beliefs that you were talking about earlier, Molly, come into play. And we can help each other if we take the time to verbalize the very value that we see in that person. I like to always ask people this question. If you see someone do an event or do something in their community or even at your home, and you have this thought, I need to tell them they did a great job, or they really touched me the way they shared that story, and you forget and you don't share because the busyness of life just swooped in and stole that moment. I call that the realm of good intentions, where all those thoughts go. We have the intent, but we don't implement. And so if you go back to that same story and have that same thought, I need to let them know they did a great job. I was really touched by what they shared. And you do share it. What happens? That person usually responds with, thank you so much. I needed to hear that. I wasn't sure how it went, if it even made a difference. You really made my day. Wow, that made me feel valued. And guess what happens? You feel wonderful because you just uplifted someone and they leave knowing that they've made a difference. That's what value is. And John Maxwell will say, you need to love your people more than you love your position. You need to value your people. Look for ways to add value to your people in your organization. As Molly mentioned before, the potential is so critical. We all have been given a measure of potential, which actually is limitless. I shouldn't even say measure, it is limitless. And God's gift to us is potential, and our gift back to Him is developing it. And so we have that responsibility as leaders to help our employees develop their potential. So, for instance, if some of your employees have to make presentations to the board or to different organizations, maybe you should consider adding value to them by letting them take courses to improve their speaking skills, sign them up for Toastmasters or other speaking organizations, enhance the gift that's within them, learn to add value to that person. That's just some ideas of how to intentionally be aware of your people.
And I think you had an example of someone that you came to know that came to an organization and brought little note cards. Can you tell about that example that you shared with me personally?
Oh,
Yeah.
yes. Her name is Connie Whitman. She is a professional who goes around the nation teaching on sales. And she was sharing with me that she goes into her workshops. Everyone that's there gets an envelope with their name written on the front of the envelope. And with that envelope comes a stack of index cards. So the whole intent during the workshop is you are to write on an index card what you think about another employee. And you fill out all the index cards and you give them out to everyone who's in the workshop. And you wind up going home with an envelope filled of value, worth, and celebration of who you are as a person and an employee. And I just think it's a fabulous idea because the workplace needs this tool. They need to know you're loved, valued, and celebrated and called forth in your giftings.
Yeah. And I think of another way to say that is that value is transferable.
Yes.
Value is transferable. And when you transfer that value to someone else, it begins to multiply. And it seems that others begin to take it on, like I told that story earlier with that staff, that they began to share amongst themselves and it began to multiply. So just that honor to one another began to multiply as they saw the transferable combination of valuing one another. And I really, I love that how you're sharing that. And it reminds me of something that we have in science called cellular respiration. And cellular respiration is a concept about being held together and what is produced. And it really seems like an appropriate analogy for the business world. And that is when glucose and oxygen come together, they come together as separate elements, as two employees might come together, or a boss and an employee might come together. So two people come together, the glucose and the oxygen. Well, when they combine together and something is produced, just like Deb and I today, it's actually called energy. In cellular respiration, at the very cell level of God's creation is that production of energy. And so this is from God's original design, that we can know that what we're talking about today and the value and the honor that we bestow and that we give away actually will produce an energy that is neither, it's not the glucose and it's not the oxygen, it's a whole new product. And I think Deb would agree that when there's a synergy across the organization and there's a begin to be a movement for value and for honor, it begins to create an energy that is exponential. And it begins to be multiplied in the way that is intended for the product. And guess what's produced? In the end, on cellular respiration, the product is waste and water. And those are very interesting because when you're in the middle of an organization where you're working on a project, you got to be sure there's going to be some waste, guys. There's going to be some things that are checked to the side, some ideas that are not current for that project to be able to move forward. But the other side of it is that it'll produce water, which is the prime need for every single one of us in order to sustain life. Life-sustaining ability for your organization to move forward is based on what you do with these pillars. And today, we are excited to let you know this is not just a mind issue. This is a transformational heart, body, soul, spirit issue. So each one of us has a part to play. And I think this is an exciting time to be together. Deb, man, this has been wonderful to be together. I hope we get to do this again soon. And I'm wondering, while we're waiting for those to put your questions in the chat box, can we share a little bit more about what's coming up in our new year? Next year in 2021, His Whole House will be having our winter season, and our series will encompass trauma awareness, aspects of how that trauma can affect individuals or corporations, and also some details around how you as an organization can get further training to understand the impact on yourself and on your team. Also want to share that Deb, with her graciousness, has said that we can take this wonderful family letter book and give it as a part of the donation to those that would like to move forward in their business with the strategies that we've talked about today and begin to get a strategic assessment to understand areas that might be missing, gaps that they might not have been able to view. And if you're interested in taking this to the next level, we have online training with special tools and exercises for you and your teams. So to access that special training and receive your free copy of the family letter, which I can tell you is just a gem, you would go to hiswholehouse.org/donate and look for the drop-down welcome offer. After we receive that welcome offer, a donation, then we will begin to contact you and be able to give you that book and make those plans for an assessment on strategic planning. Deb and I have a myriad of different kinds of training, but we are both business leaders and we understand the importance of what you're doing in the trenches and how that you want to be a caring integritous leader. And so we're going to turn this time over to Claudia for a Q&A. Claudia?
Hi, thank you, Deb and Molly, for that wonderful insight. It was really fascinating to hear the depth of your expertise in these issues. We have some questions coming forward from the audience. And our first one is from Beth, and she asks, what makes an emotionally intelligent leader?
That's a great question, Beth. Thank you for that question. And emotional intelligence has really been a subject that a lot of people have been talking about. And it's very critical in the workplace because it will enhance relationships and performance. I can tell you that all of us have an innate level of emotional ability. Some people are more natural at it, where others may have to learn. It's not a fixed ability. So with training and practice, we can all develop our emotional intelligence. And basically, Beth, what that is, I'll just cover 2 points. The first thing an emotionally intelligent leader needs to do is be self-aware of their own emotions and understand them, self-aware of what in the environment triggers them to become emotional and react to another person rather than just respond. So it's self-awareness of our own emotions. And then to take it even further is to develop empathy. Empathy is where you develop that skill to be aware and understand the emotions of the other person and their world experience, especially when their perspective is different than yours. Your emotional intelligence, if it's developed and strengthened, you'll be able to respond to that person rather than react. So emotional intelligence is critical. Be self-aware of your own, learn about others' emotions. And I think Molly, this is something that his whole house is fabulous about, is helping people understand why they're triggered in their emotions.
And that's so helpful. And with emotional intelligence, a lot of folks have determined that emotions are something to be left by the side, and that they're really not that important. And we've come to understand that actually emotions are a great indicator, and we call it a messenger, for what is going on, or how you're feeling, or what is going on with your inner person. And one of the wonderful tricks or tips, I would say, of understanding emotional intelligence is, if you have a big response to a small issue, it's likely there's some kind of issue inside that has not yet been fully processed and fully healed. And so that's a wonderful tip that I use personally, is if I'm having a big response to a small issue, it may be because there's something that is not quite in tune with the fact of the ebb and flow of what happens in daily life, which is going to be emotional up and down.
I like that, Molly.
Thank you, Beth. Appreciate that question.
Yeah.
Great.
Okay, we have another one here from Brian. So Brian asks, women tend to be cooperative and men tend to work competitively. I can handle working in both those environments. However, what do you do when someone is fooling you and pretends that they're working cooperatively but are actually undermining you? That's the first part of the question. The second part is, also, can you talk about gender and how to best work with the opposite sex, like men working with women and women working with men?
Well, the first word that comes up to me, Brian, is boundaries. When I think of the gender environment, everyone needs to be respected, honored, and valued. And you need to establish trust. There's certain boundaries that you just don't cross in the work environment. Personal space, words that we would use, in gender type relationships, because it is a work environment. You're there to work. And I'm trying to remember the first part of the question. Well, when someone who is more competitive, like a male would be more competitive, and women who seem to be more cooperative. I also, you can see women as being highly competitive as well. And again, I go back to what I've learned in DISC. If you're a high performer, you will be competitive with other people, not realizing that your strength of being competitive, when it's out of balance, becomes an obstacle to other people. And that's why you can struggle with someone who's highly competitive. They're more task oriented. They're not caring about the person, how they're affecting them by doing something in an excellent way, which excellence is what you want. But if it's at the price of another person, it's out of balance. And understanding the different personality types is so critical to learn how that other person is receiving from you, or how you get to interact with them. Molly, do you have anything?
I do. I'll take the part about the undermining and being undermined. And that's something that, again, Brian, looking to gain wisdom on how to interact with someone that may be doing a little bit of a trickster and really undermining, and letting it come to the light. I'm very, very big, and actually my motto is invite the light, because inviting the light sometimes means letting unfold what needs to unfold without any interaction on your part at all. And sometimes it means taking a boundary and stopping the working with that person, if that's at all possible for you to do. And there's sometimes where it means being very clear as to the objectives that you're following. Those are three different ways, and that's not limited to just that. But the being undermined certainly is something that does happen, and it happens in every kind of relationship, not just exclusively businesses. So hopefully that'll address it, and certainly we're happy to share more if you want to move forward for that offer. Claudia, do we have another question?
Yes. So the next question is from Dana, and this is for Debbie about the book. So does your book have some type of analysis or quiz to gauge things like emotional intelligence? Or does it help us to write a letter to communicate better with others? And does it have examples of these letters that would help us in the writing process?
Great question, Dana. First, no, I don't have a quiz or anything analytical regarding emotional intelligence in the book. The book is called The Family Letter, so it does answer your last two questions. Basically, the book was birthed out of something that I've done in my home for over 35 years, still doing it, in order to teach our children the power of encouragement and using their words. We wound up using the simple tool of a letter, because the letter is the safe place to pen your thoughts. The letter is the safe place to put all of your emotions down. So I don't have a quiz, but I have a template in the book that teaches the readers what needs to be in the letters. So it covers the spectrum where the person will know that they're loved, valued, and celebrated. I have a template for smaller children, and then for adults to use, because a lot of people say, well, what do I put in a letter? And this gives you all the specifics of what to put in the letter. And there are examples in the book. In fact, it's interesting. my children who are older now, they requested that some of our letters be put in there because they wanted the readers to see how we wrote our letters. We have humor. We have deep thoughts in the letter. And basically what we have done, Dana, is we've used this letter on our birthdays as the time of year where you always, want to be celebrated. And we use that specific day. So for instance, if it's my birthday, everyone in my family, my children and my husband, and now my grandchildren, it's gone on to the generational movement, all write me a letter. And I sit there and I read them out loud. So the benefit in that, Dana, is the person who wrote the letter hears me as I read their words, and everyone else that's around the table hears the words that were written. And every one of us are all impacted in different ways. And it just builds this amazing connection and bonding. So the book is filled with all other ideas of how to use letters. In fact, I'm going to be speaking later today on the letter of forgiveness and how that could be used. And so the book is all about using your words to bring life and to celebrate another person, whether it's in your family or outside your family. I hope
And
that
that's really why we asked Deb to share on this particular topic, because the book is filled with ways that business leaders can use the same instrument to write letters and to write emails or cards to their staff or to their peers in ways that would bring honor and humor. And it's just a wonderful, wonderful book. I adore this book, and it's something that I've seen a number of people. I actually wrote a bereavement letter after a child, to a mom whose child had died. And it helped me immensely, Deb, to be able to write a bereavement, because the celebration is that mother was the mother of a child, and that life did count, and that honoring and value comes back no matter what the occasion. So thank you.
I love that, Molly. I'm sure that mother valued that letter and holds it close to her heart.
Claudia, how are we doing?
Oh, we're doing good. Let me see here. We have more questions. So, all right, this question is from Michelle. And so Michelle says or asks, in business school, you really don't learn much about how to build integrity. You learn about the finance, I'm sure, and all of the technicalities of business, but how can I start? Where's a good place to start about how to learn to operate my business with integrity?
It's another great question. And she's right. You can't go to a business school and learn integrity, because that's a core value within yourself of how you're going to live your life, how you're going to treat people, how you're going to handle business transactions. And so integrity comes from within. And if someone struggles in that area, you can start to apply that process of integrity in your daily decisions. As you are writing out that contract, is it done in integrity? Are you being honest with your prices? Are you taking advantage? Different ideas like that. It's the decisions that you make to honor another person, another employee, or a customer, or your own family members. Integrity is something that comes from within, that you can learn to walk in. What would you say, Molly? Oh, you're muted.
Can't hear you.
Sorry. I believe in everything that you've said, and I would add one more thing, is that integrity is not something that you learn once and then are done. It is something you walk out the rest of your life, because at the end of the day, when you're quiet and you're by yourself, it's you and your own heart. And so it helps you to stay with a good conscience. It helps you to develop a good conscience. and to keep the good conscience alive, because anytime where integrity is slipped, I've noticed that the consciousness of the person gets a little hardened, and what we call is a hardened heart, commonly said in our counseling. However, it is when a person turns and returns back to integrity, then that tenderness returns, and it can be built and strengthened and strengthened and strengthened. So everything you said, and just the fact that certainly not a one-time deal, at least not for me.
That's true. It should be a lifelong journey of having integrity.
Great question, though. You don't really hear much about it amongst people. So we have time for one last question, and it's about introversion and extroversion. So if I'm an extrovert, what's the best way to work with someone who is an introvert? If I'm an introvert, how do I work with an extrovert? Because sometimes, I would imagine, I know for me, those things kind of clash. So do y'all have any tips or suggestions about that?
That's an interesting question, and that happens a lot in the office. And that's one of the reasons I love the DISC profile assessment, because the extrovert would be the I in the quadrant, the talkative, animated, always coming in your office, interrupting, just there. And they're very relational. They want their ideas heard. And maybe in the other part of the quadrant, the C, the compliant person, who's your detailed oriented person, the gatherer of the facts. They love to do an excellent job. And so they're maybe more introverted because they're busy. They're focused on their job. And so when you have that other personality coming in, just jumping in their office, what they don't appreciate from the C's perspective, the compliant, is they were caused to look up, they were interrupted from doing their job. And so they don't appreciate the joy sometimes the other person's bringing. So again, it's understanding the styles. So the I would have to say, if they want to go to lunch with this person, realize that this person is not as spontaneous as they are. So maybe it's something that has to be planned, rather than judging that person and saying, oh, they're so cold, they're so indifferent. No, they're really so detailed, they're focused, and they want to do what they're called to do. And it's just an understanding of how to approach one another, prepare for that time, and to respect their space. What would you say, Molly?
I think that's an excellent analogy of how to work with introverts and extroverts. And I've also recommended that people begin to recognize how the different people will want to be communicated with. There are those that really don't care for text. There are those that really love text. There are those that would prefer to be plan ahead a day. There's those that can do it spontaneously. Recognizing and valuing their style, I believe it adds relationship. And I've seen what's been noticeable to me is that when you start doing that, they begin to flex and they begin to be more available. And so it does work when you just check in with the other one first. Then all of a sudden you'll feel the reciprocity, the coming back and checking in with you, and it's really actually a wonderful thing. We're all meant to have and be in relationship, and relationship is critical. And that's what the 4 pillars have shared with us today. I want to thank Debi Ronca and just bless her and her heart for the work as being a wonderful speaker, author, and a life coach, as well as a dear friend and fellow minister. I really respect and honor her, and I'm so grateful you were able to join us today. So again, if you have enjoyed this and would like to have more understanding around your particular organization, do jump in and contact us through hiswholehouse.org/donate and select the welcome offer. And we will be able to send you along a free copy of Deb's book, The Family Letter, as well as schedule a consult for a 30-minute strategic planning with you and your organization or your personal needs, whichever would be best for you. We're so grateful that you were here today and a part of our webinar, and it will be, I believe it'll be posted to our YouTube channel. Claudia, we're just so grateful for what you do. Thank you for being that creative partnership director and for doing such a wonderful job. And Marty McNamara, wherever you are, our producer, we sure appreciate you.
Well, thank you both so much. And we don't have any more time for today. Thank you all for participating in the webinar and for signing up and for being here with us. I'd like to remind our audience to like us on Facebook. His Whole House is on Facebook. And follow us on LinkedIn. That's where we post a lot of our events. And you can catch all of our summer series on our YouTube channel, His Whole House Ministries. And today's webinar will post in about 2 days. So thank you again for watching today's show, and we will see you all again soon.